When I was 20, just a couple of years ago, I used to babysit for a few families around town to make extra money during college. One of my regulars was the Thompson family, and on weekends I sometimes took care of another family's kids. Let's call them the Walkers. They were well off, living in this sprawling estate just outside town. The Walkers had two young children, Sophia and Liam, who were 5 and 7. Each weekend I'd spend with them was always pretty comfortable and predictable, and since their parents left for the entire weekend, they had a guest room set up just for me. It was honestly one of the best gigs I'd ever had. It was late October when this happened, and the air was already cold, with a carpet of leaves covering the ground. I arrived at the Walker house that Friday afternoon, and as usual, the parents greeted me warmly before they left for their trip. The weekend started smoothly. Friday night was filled with laughter and games. Sophia was all about her dolls, and Liam showed off his new video games. By 7:30, Sophia was in bed, and Liam followed an hour later, leaving me with the evening to myself. The Walkers' property was stunning. Their large glass-walled pool house sat on the far end of the yard, right by a reflective pond that looked eerie in the moonlight. Inside there was a mini bar, plush sofas, arcade games, and even an intercom that connected it to the main house. A feature I'd only used to check in with the kids now and then. It was a dreamy setup for a babysitter who wanted some peace and quiet once the kids were asleep. Around 10 p.m., I grabbed a snack from the main kitchen and went back to the pool house, putting on a movie to unwind. I liked staying out there. It felt cozy and private, with no chance of waking up the kids. The night was perfectly quiet, until the intercom suddenly beeped. I jumped, my heart skipping a beat. I walked over to it and pressed the button to answer, hearing Sophia's voice on the other end, shaky and frightened. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I keep hearing noises." I sighed in relief. "Probably just the house settling, sweetie. I'll come check on you though." I slipped on my shoes, leaving my half-eaten snack and the lights on in the pool house as I walked back across the property. After entering the main house, I headed to Sophia's room. She was under her blankets, wide-eyed. I gently tucked her back in, reassuring her, and she seemed to calm down. After that, I made my way back to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. But as I stood there, I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway, as if someone was walking slowly. My heart pounded and I froze, staring down the hall. After a few seconds of silence, I shrugged it off as the house settling, or maybe the old wood expanding in the cooler air. I locked up and returned to the pool house. Back on the couch, I picked up my snack and continued my movie, glancing at my phone to text a few friends. Just as I was settling back in, the intercom rang out again, louder this time. My heart raced as I walked over to it, expecting to hear Sophia again. But there was silence. "Hello," I said, pressing the button. All I could hear was faint breathing on the other end, steady and low. "Liam?" "Sophia?" I asked, my voice trembling. But there was no response. I felt a chill run down my spine. The silence on the other end of the line seemed to stretch on forever, and an unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I called my friend Sarah for comfort, explaining the noises and the intercom. She laughed it off, saying I was just being paranoid, but even she sounded unsettled. While on the call, I glanced through the window back toward the house and froze. In the glow from the hallway light, I saw the outline of a man moving past one of the windows. His figure was tall, imposing, and he seemed to stop, looking straight toward the pool house, where I stood. I gasped, dropping the phone as fear washed over me. The intercom was still on, and I shouted into it, hoping to scare him off. "I'm calling the police. Leave now." My voice shook, but I tried to sound confident. I scrambled to pick up my phone again, dialing 911 as my hands trembled. I could hardly keep it together enough to tell the operator what was happening. The dispatcher tried to calm me down, asking where I was and if I was safe, and I could only stammer out the address, pleading for them to hurry. The operator asked about the kids, and I froze, realizing they were still in the house with a possible intruder. Suddenly, Sophia's voice came over the intercom, shaking as she cried, "He's here. He's in the house." That was all it took. I ran from the pool house, bolting across the yard and into the main house, heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't think of anything but getting to those kids. I found Sophia and Liam huddled at the top of the stairs, both terrified. I scooped them up, quietly leading them toward the front door, trying to keep my own fear at bay for their sake. As we made our way out, I caught a glimpse of the intruder again. A disheveled, older man with a look of deranged satisfaction on his face, standing in the shadows of the living room. His eyes were dark, his mouth twisted in a grin that made my blood run cold. I shielded the kids, shushing them and urging them to move faster. We reached the pool house and locked ourselves in, huddling together in the dark as I spoke with the dispatcher. Soon enough, blue and red lights filled the yard and flashlights scanned the property. The police had arrived. We stayed hidden until a soft knock on the door signaled it was safe to come out. A female officer led the kids out, while I spoke to another officer, explaining everything that had happened. I barely kept it together, describing the figure I'd seen, the intercom calls, and the children's cries. My voice wavered, the adrenaline finally draining as I realized we were safe. Or so I thought. The police soon located the intruder hiding behind the garage. They dragged him out in handcuffs, his eyes still darting toward me and the kids, an unsettling smirk on his face. His appearance was almost unearthly, his skin was pale and thin, stretched taut over his cheekbones. His clothes were disheveled, as if he'd been hiding out for days. I'll never forget the look in his eyes as he was led away. Dark, vacant, and filled with something twisted. Sophia and Liam's parents returned that night, horrified to learn what had happened. They stayed with the kids while I gave my statement to the officers. I left soon after, too shaken to stay. The workers apologized profusely, but I knew I couldn't work there anymore, not after what had happened. The thought of those kids alone, and that face watching me from the window, haunted me. I didn't sleep for days after, the memory replaying in my head on an endless loop. The police eventually informed the workers that the man had been living in an abandoned cabin on a nearby property, creeping through yards and occasionally breaking into empty homes. I was haunted by the possibility of what could have happened if we hadn't gotten out in time. To this day, I can't babysit without feeling a twinge of fear, wondering if I'll ever see that twisted, vacant face again. I can only hope that the kids have managed to forget, though deep down, I doubt any of us ever will.